Joining us here now on the Rich Eisen Show, fresh back from his time in Columbus, Ohio, Bruce Feldman here. You're on your couch. You're on your where do we find you, Bruce, right now?
I'm on the couch. I'm on the couch right now.
Okay, you're on the shelf on the couch. Well, it's good to see you, Bruce. I appreciate you doing this as opposed to being here in person. So let me ask you this question: How surprising to you was this result? You were physically there in Columbus over the weekend.
Shocking. I mean, I think the only person I knew of who was expecting a Michigan win was our friend Charles Woodson. I think everybody else looked at it and go, okay, this is not just a Michigan team that has an inept offense. Now it's an inept Michigan team. We found out, pretty much the night before that Colston Loveland, their best player on offense, he wasn't going to be able to play in the game. On top of that, Will Johnson, who's their best defensive back and arguably their best defensive player, he's missed much of the second half of the season. He wasn't going to play. So you're talking about a team that's already shaky, and now they're going to be missing, their best offensive player and arguably their best defensive player. And we watched Ryan Day, hanging an extra touchdown on Indiana the week before, even when his running back slid down at the 2-yard line to run out the clock. And then Ryan Day threw another touchdown on the fire. And he probably never heard of Kurt Cignetti a year before, and he ran it up. You don't think he was going to try to put up 70 if he could have against the Michigan Wolverines? And obviously they couldn't even put up 11 points on them. It was crazy.
Why did Ohio State keep running into the strength of Michigan's defense rather than relying on their clear advantage outside? Bruce, why did that happen, do you think?
I think a couple of things. You go in there thinking, hey, physical teams show their physicality, by running the football. But then I think there's another part of it where I just don't think there was a lot of trust with Will Howard. He had a couple of bad interceptions, one early in the game. It happened, inside their own 10-yard line. It was really costly. Will Howard was shaky when they played Penn State, threw a pick six, on his first throw, and then kind of settled in. But I also thought they had issues protecting the quarterback. But there still could have been stuff you would have thought they would have been able to do to get the ball to J.J. Smith, get the ball to Emeka Egbuka, get the ball to the running backs out in space. I mean, because they couldn't run the football. And what felt like it happened, this is different, but there were some similarities. 2 years ago, the game is in Ohio State. It's in Columbus. And it felt like Ohio State should have been up by way more than they were at halftime. And Michigan was able to hang around. Now, what I remember distinctly from being on this Michigan sideline in that game was the leaders of that Michigan team, most of them are now in the NFL. They're still not there. But they were basically in their minds calling out, and to their teammates calling out that we're the tougher team. Those guys on the other sideline, they're about to quit. And there was a huge belief in the Michigan, program that they were just the tougher team and were going to take over in the second half and in the fourth quarter. And they did. With this game, a lot of different players at Michigan. And I think that what it came down to was you had an Ohio State team. It wasn't just what you said. It was also they're missing, field goals that they should hit. It was they were just melting down. It was a team that looked tighter and tighter. And I think that was the part that was just ooh, they're unraveling. Again, credit to Michigan. They were the more physical team. Kalel Mullings, they should have he should never pay for a drink in Ann Arbor for the rest of his life. I mean, that guy put the team on his back when they beat USC, and he did it again. And to think 2 years ago, going into this game, he was still a linebacker, and then they flipped him because of injuries to play running back. He has been a revelation for them. But again, I think a lot of this was self-inflicted with Ohio State too. And Michigan did enough to create that dynamic. And it was they almost, baited a trap for Ohio State, and that guy fell into it.
So what is your reporting right now, Bruce Feldman of Fox Sports and The Athletic, before we get to the college football playoff? What's your reporting on Ryan Day's seat? The Buckeye fans that I know, they've gone through many stages of grief right now, and it started with severe anger with Ryan Day Is he coaching for his job in these playoffs, Bruce?
I don't think he is. I don't know how you fire him. He's 66-10, right? They can't, even 2 years ago when they lost at home, they, came within a field goal to beating Georgia. And if they in the playoff game, if they make that, they're playing TCU and they're beating, they're going to win a national title. But that didn't happen. And now they're going into the playoff, licking their wounds, of this as they, we'll see who they're going to get matched up with. They would have to win 3 games. They're plenty talented. I mean, I would argue, and I wrote this, the other day for The Athletic, I think they're the most talented team in the country, top to bottom. It's just right now, they're not playing well. They're coming off, there's going to be a lot of soul searching. They won't play Michigan. They won't have to to face them again this year, but they will face good teams. What kind of shape are they going to be in emotionally? My biggest point of this is not whether Ohio State still wants Ryan Day, because just from people I know who've talked to the new AD there, Ross Bjork. I don't think he wants any part of going through a coaching search right now. He just got there. I don't think that to do something like that. So look, barring them winning the national title and winning the playoff, which wouldn't totally shock me, because like I said, everybody has a lot of flaws. There's no 2019 LSU team or one of those Georgia teams that, won the national title. All these teams are very suspect, and they're as talented as anybody. But barring them winning it all, I think the issue is going to come back to, Ryan Day at some point doing some evaluation of just everything around him with his family. And from everything I've heard, it has been a really, really tough time for them in dealing with a lot of what they've been dealing with the last couple of years. And that was before Saturday. I think it's only going to get worse after losing, because the teams they lost to before, like last year, they lost to a team that won the national title. The year before that, they lost to a playoff team. This team they lost to was the worst Michigan team they faced since the early Rich Rod days. It's not a good team. They're terrible on offense. They just fired the offensive coordinator yesterday. I mean, they were banged up in the secondary. Yeah, the D line's really good, but it was not like, this was not a great team, and they lost to them, and they were home, and they spent $20 million on guys in the portal for this year. So I think that's the part where he sits there and look, we know from, Ryan Day being very candid about his own, life story and some of the things that he and his family had to deal with. And I think he has a great awareness of the importance of mental health. And I wonder if when he sits down after the season and thinks, do I want to keep doing this here? Is this the best thing for me and my family? I think those are going to be, I think that to me, that's like a different question than is Ohio State ready to move on from him, whether, Mike Vrabel wants to be a college coach and come home. I just don't think there's beyond Mike Vrabel. I don't think there's really easy answers to say, oh yeah, somebody's going to come in here and do better than Ryan Day has done. It's not easy. It's not an easy needle to thread there.
No, certainly when you're 66-10, but not to put you in a position here, and then we'll get to the college football playoff. Again, Buckeye fans that I speak to wonder about the guy who was smirking at Charles on your set during the pregame show to his left, as Charles was even had the temerity to suggest in this horseshoe that Michigan could come out with the win. What about Urban coming back? Urban 2.0 in Ohio State, Bruce?
Not to speak for Urban, because obviously I work with him at Fox, but I'd be very surprised. What Urban left and when he left is a very different version of college football than it is now. There's NIL, there's a transfer portal, there's revenue sharing coming down. There's a lot of stuff going on. And Urban, I just don't see him either being ready to deal with all that other stuff when it comes to roster management and everything else in the new version of college football. Even if he wanted to, I think anybody who's really hands-on in it, and look, some of the people he's still close to, one of his proteges, Kyle Whittingham, terrific coach at Utah, but has really struggled in the last, especially this year. I mean, I think a lot of the guys he knows, it's like think they're looking, on the getting out of it, much less diving back into it. I think people romanticizing 7-0 in his record versus Michigan. Obviously, I know he's super proud of that, but I just personally, my own impression of him and what how he'd have to dive into college football in a way that he's I don't see that. I don't think that's realistic at all. I think that's wishful thinking on the hands of a couple of, Michigan fans right now who are very frustrated.
NIL and portal, I mean, world is no doubt different for sure. I've got Bruce Feldman from Fox Sports and The Athletic right here on the Rich Eisen Show. So much to talk about. Let's get into the college football playoff results. With 1 week to go, Bruce, what were your impressions of watching this new fangled CFP 12-team world? What do you think of this right now?
I'm not surprised that Alabama got bumped ahead of Miami at this point. Alabama's a 3-loss team. They have, they lost at Vanderbilt. They had a really bad loss a couple of weeks ago where they got blown out by a very mediocre Oklahoma team. They lost 24-3. But Miami had a 21-0 lead at Syracuse, and they ended up losing, and they had a chance to win. They have 2 losses. It's unfortunate for them. Like, they have, their best win probably is against a 9-3 Duke team that is not in those rankings. Now, they may end up sneaking back in there. Maybe if UNLV or Army lose this weekend, then maybe Duke ends up there. I doubt it. But like, they don't have any wins over that. I just think the reality is the committee and the college football establishment thinks much higher of the SEC than it certainly does of the ACC. And the idea of leaving a 9-3 Alabama team, which does have a really good win over Georgia, out of the playoff, is something I just wouldn't expect, wasn't going to expect, because even with the loss to Oklahoma, it's still the SEC and it's still a big brand in the SEC. And again, Miami, it's, the analogy I would give, it's like the team that played a game, played a big game, and then at the end of the game, there was a questionable call that went against them. And ultimately, the coaches have to come down to it and go, like, look, one call, we let it in the hands of the officials. That's on us. And I think in this case, in Miami's case, you lose to Syracuse and you left it in doubt, and that's what's going to happen. You're in the ACC, they're in the SEC. Like, you're being naive if you don't think that stuff matters to the people in that room.
And what do you think of the possibility of a new number one? Penn State beats Oregon. What do you think about this weekend's contest? How do you think this weekend's contest could shake everything up of what's remaining, Bruce?
Yeah, I mean, if Penn State beats Oregon or if Texas avenges the loss to Georgia, does that, move them up? I mean, it'd be interesting to me. I think the most curious thing, and I don't think this will happen, but if Georgia ends up beating Texas pretty handily, then Texas is going to have 2 losses to Georgia, both probably by more than 2 touchdowns or by, 15 points and whatever, like if they were to lose, but they're not going to have any wins over top 25 teams, and they would be sitting there with 2 losses. I don't, again, the committee says they don't, has kind of messaged this, that they don't want to punish teams who get to play in a conference championship game. I do think SMU sitting there at number 8 is vulnerable. I think if they lose to Clemson this weekend and SMU doesn't have any great wins either, I think they could be getting knocked out. And I think you may only get that one ACC team. I don't know that for a fact, obviously, but
you wouldn't be able to put Clemson in a bye week spot. So who would pop up, into a bye week spot? Like who would they? And you can't be Notre Dame, who would be the team that would be next up. One would think,
yeah, but I think you're looking at it saying, okay, it's going to be Boise State would get that spot.
Well, Boise State would get a spot that they're currently in if they win.
No, but I'm saying you're going to get it's basically 5 for 4 spots. So you're sitting there, you're going to have a Penn State. I I would assume, like there's one brand you're missing there, but like I I
What
would assume you're going to have. Uh,
you
I'm
put
sorry, go
Ohio?
ahead.
No, I'm just trying to. So you'd say Ohio State could just sit at home, watch Penn State lose to Oregon, and then they would be upgraded from one home
No, I
game
don't think. I'm sorry.
to.
That's what you were asking. No, I don't think Ohio State would leapfrog Penn State then
But
and
what
get
if
back.
Penn State loses? You see, that's what I'm saying is that you've got SMU and you've got Boise State currently
Well,
sitting in bye week spots. Let's say UNLV and Clemson win their conference
then
championships.
I
You're
think
not
it
going
would
to
be
take them and
then I
put
think
them in a bye week spot. Who would you take from the current,
then it would be a Big 12 team. You know, you're either having a Big 12 team or an ACC team or Boise State going to be paired, some combination of those to go with the SEC champ and the Big 10 champ. You would have two of the three of those. So it's either going to be, depending on what happens, whether it's Arizona State sitting there at 15, or you could have Clemson at 17, potentially, vault
man.
in. I don't think that's going to happen,
That's
but you have.
that's quite an upgrade. I mean, that's what I'm saying is that if Arizona State and
It's Arizona State and Iowa State are playing, so you have 15 and 16.
right. So if
Of
Arizona State wins and then there's a bye week available, you're just going to give it to Arizona State from 15-3, or you'd give Clemson from 17-4. I mean, that's like going from standby to a first class seat,
Well, that's
man.
what the conference camps are getting. And Notre Dame, the way they agreed to this deal was they weren't, in this iteration of this, they weren't open for the opening
Right.
week bye.
Jeez. Wow. Okay, Bruce. I appreciate the time. Before I let you go, one for me right here. What's your reporting on who the next OC of Michigan could be? I mean, and this that you and I understand. I'm biased, but when you can join Michigan and Bryce Underwood's the quarterback and you're the offensive coordinator, and I'm seeing all these other kids that are saying I'll come too as soon as Bryce Underwood said yes. This is a pretty plum job, man, and it's a pretty big hire for Sharon Moore. What do you think, Bruce?
Yeah, I know Joe Craddock at Tulane is a name that has come up. I would not be surprised if they looked at a Joe Moorhead, who did a terrific job as Penn State and Oregon's OC. Now he's the head coach at Akron, but I know that there's been some interest from some Big Ten schools in him. There's a lot of big OC jobs that are open. So I would expect, we reported in the pregame that we were expecting Kirk Campbell to be out after that game. Obviously, that happened yesterday. I know Michigan they're also going to be in the market probably for a grad transfer quarterback to bring in addition to Underwood. So there's a lot of interesting pieces that have to be sorted out in Ann Arbor right now, in the wake of obviously a big weekend, but there's a lot of stuff going on there that I think Sharon Moore has to get settled into.
Last one, is this Travis Hunter's Heisman to lose as we're sitting here right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited to watch Ashton Genty on Friday night.
Sure.
He's the only one even close. I'd be shocked if anyone's to me, Travis Hunter has run away with the Heisman this year.
All right, Bruce, thanks for the time. Greatly appreciate it. We'll see you here next week. Hopefully we'll get you back on your feet, brother.
Yeah, that's good.
You got it. That's Bruce Feldman, everybody, back here on the Rich Eisen Show. That's a lot to chew on right there. Whew. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku Channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.